Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Uber is being run out of town. London town, at least, which, if it stands up, may be the beginning of the end of the taxi firm, which isn't a taxi firm, the big employer, which has no employees, the firm once so favoured by Downing Street that their sofas became almost interchangeable.
It's a bold move by London Mayor Sadiq Khan, and already the online petition against the ban has reached a staggering 1 million in just a few days. Uber have said they will appeal to the Tory Secretary of State, but already the company have started making the very concessions they said they couldn't make before they lost their license.
Joining us to discuss the Uber wars is Lewis Norton, Branch Secretary of the Taxi Drivers Union, the RMT. Lewis, thanks for coming on the Sputnik. I've exaggerated slightly calling them the Uber wars, but it has been several years of real attrition, hasn't it?
It has, George. It's been since 2012, since Uber were first licensed in London, which, quite frankly, they should never have been. But under Boris Johnson, they seem to have been given an easy ride, railroaded through all the regulations and the authority given to them by Transport for London, so they could provide a service that is undercut, deregulated, licensed taxi drivers and legitimate private hire firms as well.
That's an important point, because one of the false dichotomies being drawn here is that if you're against Uber, you're siding with the black cabs, but it isn't just the black cabs. It's the legitimate private hire companies too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite important to understand that our union, the RMT, has always maintained that there should be differentials, distinctions between the two tiers of regulation, which TfL have fudged by allowing Uber to operate. So the decision for Transport for London to take action against Uber through their fit and proper character, although it's welcome, there still is going to be some battle lines to be drawn between the private hire and the taxi sector, so everyone can operate both tiers within the city at the behest of the travelling public that is safe as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come back to the issue of safety, but what happens next now? The licence, they've been informed that their licence is to be withdrawn. They have a right of appeal to the Tory party that they're not unfriendly towards, let's put it no higher than that. There's a fair chance that the Secretary of State will overturn the ban, isn't there?
Well, let's wind it back, George. If we look at the Uber licence, as you said in your intro, there's a massive chance they may do that with the Tory party. We've seen the chumocracy of David Cameron, George Osborne, Boris Johnson, with Cameron's aide or his godmother working for the firm, Rachel Whetstone. So they're steeped in the Tory party, so that if the Tory party are going to pull any strokes or any favours from, they're going to do it now, especially where we've got a London mayor where Sadiq Khan has ostensibly made a very bold move in rejecting Uber's licence. So, yeah, I think there's more to come, and if you like, the battle is starting now, George.
Well, they have begun to now make the concessions that they said they couldn't make before. You were just telling me that there are other private hire companies that are now beginning to lose tribunals on things like whether or not their drivers are employees in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we came on, as we were discussing offset, that Addison Lee, a leading private hire firm, have just lost a tribunal that stated they were categorising their workers as self-employed, much like Uber. It's been found that they are actually workers that are defined and to have basic rights under statutory employment law, which is incredible, because if we look at some of the rhetoric coming out of Uber towers and a lot of their users, I think it's a little bit unfair of us to put all the blame on Uber. Some of the users out there are quite uneducated about, you know, the system and the service they use. This is a company that has tried to put daylight between their employees or their workers or their partners for a considerable amount of time. And now they're using them to scapegoat this decision taken by Transport for London. And they're a very caring company. And now they're thinking, well, we've got to put all these people out of work through Transport for London. God, give them a chance. It's quite It's quite outrageous, if I'm quite honest with you, really. And you've got Tory party saying the same thing. What about the 40,000
Yeah,
workers?
exactly. What about the 40,000 workers? What do you know about them?
Well, the 40,000 workers, as I understand it, are self-employed workers. And as Uber always said, they are partners of their company.
Yeah.
So if they want to work and continue to work in the private hire sector, they can. They've always been able to do that. They can work for legitimate companies like Addison Lee, arguably under better terms and conditions than they had privately.
Well, definitely under better terms and conditions.
Absolutely.
Because any Uber driver that anyone's ever heard from will tell you the incredible hours, sleeping in their car, having to go to the toilet on waste ground in the middle of the night, no facilities of any kind, and if you take the hours they work and the money that they make, they're not even remotely on the minimum wage.
Well, I think the last figure what came out of the Employment Tribunal last year, and by a report done by Frank Field MP, was it was £4.86 an hour. And that's over a 12-hour shift, let's say, maybe longer. Fatigue of the driver, and that's before they have to take out expenses for fuel, car hire. So it is modern slavery, you know, in the only terms to be defined as, yeah.
The proximate cause for TfL's decision to unlicense or de-license them is the almost incredible parade of road traffic accidents, crimes that have been committed, including some of the most serious crimes against the travelling public by Uber drivers. I mean, allegedly, it's not been in court yet, but one of their drivers ran at Buckingham Palace with a samurai sword. It doesn't get much worse PR than that. So, in a way, TfL were forced to do this, weren't they, by public outrage?
I think what Transport for London have done is they've gauged Uber's fit and proper character, which they are duty-bound to do as a regulator, which taxi drivers are well met with this criteria. And I think they've looked at all the cumulative evidence against Uber, as you said, the sexual assaults mounting up, the abdication of their authority to not report these crimes to the police, which is an absolute travesty. It's outrageous considering they're driving around the public. Also using their own choice of disclosure and barring service company to ascertain and undertake checks on their drivers, bogus medical examinations. I mean, all this really builds a picture and a narrative that this is a company that is riding roughshod through all legislation and regulation to protect the travelling public at the cost to offer a cheap service, and that is it. And I actually think a lot of the public need to understand that and actually, on reflection, look at it and say...
And a lot of them don't, as you have now twice inferred. Let's deal with that. You get people saying, I can't afford to go in Lewis Norton's black cab. Uber's the only way I can get around. Of course, how cheap is cheap if your wife ends up on the end of a serious assault at the hands of the driver who had no character profile or reference or test of any kind? How cheap is cheap if the car, which is not up to standard, wraps itself around a lamppost going up a one-way street, which happens practically daily with Uber's cars. But how do you deal with this point?
Well, how this point with the public, I think, is for education, George, and it's very difficult. And unfortunately, everything we see in society today, in every service, it's all about price, price, price. And that appears to be the bottom line.
Because the technology you've got as well,
absolutely.
don't you?
I think the technology, again, if we come on to it, is a slight red herring, because actually it was the licensed cab trade had it first.
Yeah.
And we used it with our own apps, our own companies prior to 2012. But I think regarding the public, there's a myth that taxis are expensive in London. And we're talking about London. I'm a London taxi driver. But if we look at the tariff of a London taxi meter, it's only increased 100% over a 25-year period. In 1991, the tariff started at £1.20. In 2015, it was £2.40. Now, any other market product out there has probably increased 3 times. I mean, when 1992, 1993, I remember getting a bottle of water for 40p. How much do you pay for a bottle of water now? £2? And it's really not the issue that black cabs are expensive. It's that wages have fallen. We've seen more and more privatisation of businesses, of companies, more and more people coming out of non-trade union industries. And the reality is people got less money in their pocket, and the cab has retained a sticky price in a free-falling, free market economy. And Uber is just really complementing that for the shareholders and for people who are ideologically subscribed to that, George.
Well, it's the ultimate in capitalism read in tooth and claw, isn't it? It's the brave new world that the Tories love to dream of, where everybody's car is a taxi, everybody's house is an Airbnb.
Yeah.
And don't forget the soft power as well. Uber is mentioned in all the popular series all over Hollywood, and
It is, yeah. It's a bit of a mystery.
Well, it's become a byword, Uber. I find it's quite interesting. We in the industry find that people say taxis, private hire and Uber. You know, it's almost like a third tier, and it's not. They're a private hire firm. And Ian Wright, who was the chair of the Business Innovation and Skills Committee, former MP for Hartlepool, Labour, probably remember him.
I thought you were talking about the former Arsenal striker.
I think he gets black cabs, so I think Ian Wright's all right, the former forward. But Ian Wright, the former MP, actually described him as a seedy backstreet minicab firm, and that's what it is. And when you strip away all the shiny technology and the appeal of them, they are just a minicab firm.
In Amsterdam.
Yeah, railroading through regulations.
They're a minicab firm without the safety net that a minicab firm has to have. And so the technology exists amongst black cabs. It existed before Uber. Uber said they were not an employer. Now they're complaining about people they're going to have to sack that they never admitted to having in the first place. They don't pay tax. They're located offshore. They don't even have an office, or they didn't for quite some time. They didn't even have a telephone number, deliberately, because they claim to be in her home city of Amsterdam. They're just a technology app in Amsterdam. That's all, Gov. Well, in that case, why do we need them?
Well, that's the question I've been asking myself for the last 5 years, George. I think what Uber has done, really, is it's blown open the industry. And if I can say that, Transport for London have probably been shown up as a regulator with some of their some of the loopholes in their regulation and how they regulate taxi and private hire. I mean, our union has always campaigned that the technology that Uber has evolved, it's not an issue with it, but it's how it applies to the existing framework of regulation. We've always maintained that taxis can only apply for hire on the streets of London. They can be taken off a street or with your hand hailed, excuse me. And private hire can't do that. And the reason they can't do that is because the drivers and industry is not as regulated as the same as a licensed taxi. But what Uber have done with the technology is fudged that. They basically put a phone in the hand. You can see the vehicles on the screen. You get directly put in contact with a driver without going through the arbitrator. And as you say, it's somewhere in Amsterdam, or it's not even an operator. It's now a tech forwarding company or whatever other Machiavellian title they want to give themselves. So they're obfuscating at every turn what they are to abdicate their responsibility as an operator. We would say from the RMT's perspective that we'd like to see more transparency in how the two tiers of regulation are upheld. And as we've spoken before, George, about having a right to apply for hire defined in statutory law, therefore it would put private hire on one side, tax on another, and it would avoid a blurring of this going forward, because Uber may be gone, but another start-up, another slick tech giant could be coming, VC capital up the back, and it would be in the same situation again.
They'll not have the $50 billion war chest that Uber started with. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Lewis Norton of the RMT taxi driver branch, thanks for joining us on the Sputnik.
Coming up next, a homage to Catalonia. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to the Sputnik. Regular viewers will know that I'm not a great fan of separatism, of the partitioning of countries, but sometimes it becomes the zeitgeist. And if the state which is threatened with partition doesn't box clever, it can become unstoppable.
Which might be the case in Catalonia. 7.5 million people in this, the richest part of Spain, are due to vote in an unofficial referendum on independence, and thus the breakup of modern Spain. Madrid has responded with force, not yet deadly, but perhaps headed that way.
Joining us to take stock is Seila Becerra, Secretary of the Catalan National Assembly, which is leading the fight for independence. Seila, thanks for joining us. Let's deal with the practical issue first. Can this referendum actually now go ahead after the ballot papers have been seized, officials arrested, handcuffed even, the police being shipped in from all over the Spanish state to stop it from happening? Can it actually happen?
Well, I think that we have lots of options. We have total faith in the government, in the Catalan government, the Generalitat. We actually think that they have a plan B for everything that is happening. We still think that if we do it in a pacific way, we can still go and vote. And the options are we we can go to vote, or we can go back in time and go maybe to old times.
What would that mean, going back to old times?
Yeah, sorry. Old times meaning as going back to where Franco was alive and maybe have a dictatorship back again, because the situation now it's quite tricky. And if they have brought all of the Spanish police to Catalonia, means that they want the control of our nation back again.
If you'll forgive me saying, it's not quite as simple as that. There is a Spain has a constitution. It was put to a referendum. 91% of the people in Catalonia voted for the Spanish constitution, which states that Spain is indivisible. So the legal position isn't going to change. The constitution isn't going to change. The law is clear that Spain is indivisible. The democratic reality is that 91% of Catalans voted for that constitution. Now, times have changed, and the separatist cause has undoubtedly become much more popular, maybe even hegemonic in Catalonia now. And so you have that new political reality clashing with the legal position in the state.
Yeah, but we need to go back in time and think how the constitution was actually voted, which was the situation, and it was after the transition. We need to think that we were in a dictatorship and we were going to a democracy. So of course the Catalans voted to have a constitution because they knew how it was being in a dictatorship. So nowadays, most of the people that they voted the constitution, they are not alive, and the circumstances have actually changed.
Well, it was only the 80s. I mean, I'm not sure that you could say that they're not alive, but the point is the constitution had a very clear clause that Spain is indivisible, and you voted for it.
Then there is an article in the Constitution that says that it's legal to have a referendum if most of the people in the parliament, they accept it. Although some proposals have been, carried out from the Catalan government to the Spanish government, and they haven't accepted.
No, of course that's undoubtedly true. Sorry, go on.
Maybe why is this? What prompted this sudden surge? I mean, I understand this, this call for independence has been on for a while, but suddenly it's been, upsurging, and throughout the world, the diaspora, Catalonian diaspora, have been demonstrating for it. What prompted it?
Well, I would say that this is only consequence of different things that have happened, like recently. Everything started with big concentrations. Then we have a law that actually regulates the Catalonia, which is the Statute. That was actually taken by the Constitutional Tribunal. I think everything started in here. Everything was triggered this day. And now, because we have the 9M, so on the 9th of November, we went to vote. The actual government, when we voted for them, the Catalan government, we always wanted them to actually prepare a referendum, because they said that they were going to do a referendum. There's no way back now, because they would actually not doing what they said that they were going to do originally, and that's why they are there for.
Well, look, I understand the Catalan people speak a different language. It's not a Spanish-speaking part of the state. The Catalans suffered enormously in the period of fascist dictatorship and played a heroic role in resisting that dictatorship. Some of my own countrymen gave their blood there in the International Brigade. It's quite clear that the Catalans have a pretty decent case for claiming they're a separate nation from Spain. The Spanish government has mishandled this whole thing fantastically badly. The sight of Catalan officials in handcuffs and ballot papers and posters and leaflets being seized by the state is all very ugly, and it's only going to make the division worse. Is there nothing short of independence that would satisfy the majority of your people, do you think? Or have relations broken down now?
I think the relations are completely broken. If they proposed something 2 years ago, 1 year ago, maybe now the situation would be different. But now, when everyone goes to concentrate because they see all of the civil police going into different Catalan buildings to get people and to get documentation. They see the violence getting into our, our cities. Although there's no violence for the moment, we see that they are getting into our houses and taking the things that belong to us. Now we feel that this relation has been completely broken.
The drafting in of the police from outside makes it look like what it is. It means it's an occupied territory.
Yeah.
And an occupied territory will inevitably produce a resistance. And before we know it, on the streets of Western European cities, there could be blood flowing. It's a very dire prospect. But so is a unilateral declaration of independence, because no one else will be able to recognize you. No other European country will be able to recognize you. You may be subject to economic sanctions from other parts of the European Union. Of course, people everywhere love Barcelona, but the states will not recognize it, cannot recognize it, because it would encourage similar breakaways in their own countries. So it's a kind of bleak prospect either way, isn't it?
Now, Britain is a good example. Maybe there's more life outside the European Union, saying that there's no case of secessionism inside the European Union since the European Union has been established. So now saying that we are going to be out of the European Union, or that we are not going to be recognized inside the European Union, for me it's early days, because it has never happened. So either saying we are going to stay or we are going to leave, we are just making fiction history. We don't know it. We don't know where it's going to happen.
No, that's fair, but I've been in politics a long time, and I know the international logic. If Catalonia is allowed to continue in the EU, having broken away from Spain without agreement, this can only lead to further secessionist problems in Italy, in Germany, and in Belgium itself, and in many other parts of the world. So you are posing a big problem to the international system. Don't get me wrong, I think the Spanish government is behaving deplorably. And they are actually making much more likely the very thing they say they're seeking to avoid. If there was a referendum, give me your honest and best estimation of what the voting would be. Are we talking 55-45 like Scotland? Are we talking 90-10? What sort of levels are we talking about?
I think it would be more like Scotland, if I'm honest. There's a lot of people that they would probably vote for independence, but they don't do it because they have this fear of not being part of a biggest union, even though they would probably vote if they had this assurance that everything was going to be okay. We don't know what is going to happen, because obviously this voting is not legal, because the Spanish government is clearly saying that they don't consider it as legal. So we don't know how many people is going to turn out and vote, because some other people we have fear. So they are going to be scared of going and vote, because maybe something is going to happen to them. Maybe the police is going to be there. Maybe they are going to close the schools, because we normally in Spain we normally vote in the schools. So they are even if the yes wins, it's probably going to be more like Scotland. No, it's not going to be a massive win.
Not a landslide. Yes. Who is Barcelona going to play at football if we leave Spain?
This is the typical question that everyone asks.
There's only one other team, isn't there?
We have Espanyol, which is a little one.
Which is a bit ironic that it's called Espanyol.
It's a bit ironic because it's in Barcelona, funded by Catalans. But well, you know. What about Monaco? Monaco can play in the French league, doesn't it?
It does, that's a good point, but I don't think the Spanish league will be quite as forgiving as the French league.
The question then is, what is Real Madrid going to do without Barcelona?
That's also a very good question. It's been delightful talking to you. I really pray that your issues are resolved, above all, peacefully and democratically. Thanks for joining us on the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So, will the Catalonians say sí or no to their independence? Ricardo Picasso says, in a world which desperately needs fewer borders, they're crying yes to more. The Spanish government is not helping either by going way beyond Project Fear.
That's a fact. If the British had behaved in the Scottish referendum the way Spain is behaving in the Catalan referendum, the result would have been very different.
About Uber being banned out of London, Roger the Dodger says Uber is a business model from medieval times. Workers have no rights and all liabilities are passed on to the workers.
I agree with that entirely, and I was one of the first to be saying that
Exactly.
5 years ago. I promised if I was the mayor of London that I'd run Uber out of town. Who knew that Sadiq Khan would be the man to do it?
Well, that's all the time we've got for the tweets today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on social media, on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today, or on Twitter, on Instagram, RT_Sputnik. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.